Good evening and welcome to another edition of Everything Vaguely Paranormal. I am Ryan Roberts and these are my partners in the paranormal, Mr. Blake Smith and Miss Shelley Pruitt. How y'all doing?
Doing great. Boy, that pre-broadcast.
Pre-broadcast, just forewarning, if you're going to watch it
Mhm.
on Wednesday morning, pre-broadcast very quickly went into post-broadcast territory.
Yeah, earphones.
Apologies.
You know the rules.
But we did talk about aliens though, so that
We did in a
We-
very
Did.
odd way.
Sure.
Anyway, if
Very
you're not a
much.
Patreon member, go become one because
Lord.
not only did I read some interesting things that were sent to me,
Mhm.
also we went into some very strange territory, which is not unusual for us.
I mean, but technically we were on brand, so we're all good.
Yeah.
It's basically sex ed with EVP.
Yeah. So, guys, tonight we're going to talk about the War of the Worlds broadcast. I'm getting away from that as fast as I
yeah,
possibly
it's
can.
probably
Please
best
do.
you do.
Pull up. Segue, my friend.
So tonight we're going to be talking about the War of the Worlds broadcast that took place back in the 30s. You guys know much about this topic?
Oh yes, this is a topic that
Mhm.
I absolutely love.
Me too. What about you, Blake?
That is one, like, I've heard about it. I heard the mass hysteria, but I've never gone, like, super in-depth with this night. So I'm excited to hear the story of this.
Well, as Alien fans and theater kids, you're gonna fucking love this story. I can't wait to get into it so you guys can see what actually took place. So you guys ready
I'm
to roll?
ready. I'm
Let's do it.
absolutely ready. I've been waiting for this one.
All right. So the night before Halloween is known as Mischief Night. It is a night where all kinds of pranksters and ne'er-do-wells roam the streets and back alleys, just looking for innocent and unsuspecting victims to pull a fast one on and scare out of their wits, leaving them wondering who or what they just encountered. It was on this night in 1938 that millions of Americans were sitting in their homes and gathered around the radio that Sunday evening, winding down and listening to their program of choice before getting up and starting their work week the next morning. The radio had become a vital lifeline for dissemination of information and keeping the masses up to date on what was happening around the world.
He said insemination. Sorry.
Anyways.
Get out of the pre-broadcast.
News of
Be
impending
present
war.
in the moment right now. Be present.
I'm trying.
News of impending war had been coming from Europe as Germany and her fascist Nazi regime had been invading her neighbors and gobbling up territory, throwing the world into utter turmoil and raising the anxiety of every American. As these Americans turned their dials on their radios looking for their favorite Sunday night show, many of them heard news flashes and sounds of impending doom emanating over the CBS airwaves and into their living rooms. But unlike the news bulletins of that summer and early fall, the invaders were not the dreaded Nazis, but men from the planet Mars here to take over and run roughshod over the continental US. Husbands clutched their wives, and mothers held their children, as reporters on the scene were vaporized before their very ears, and extraterrestrial killing machines marched down the heavily populated streets of New York City. For all they knew, this was the end of the world. But it was nothing more than a group of actors in a studio, putting on a gripping adaptation of a literary classic, completely oblivious to the pandemonium taking place in Radioland. And once America figured this out, they realized, but were absolutely furious that they had been made fools of. How did this happen? And what led up to this? And what were the repercussions? Well, to figure that out, we have to start a few years earlier. A few years before Orson Welles and John Houseman started the program that would scare millions to death. One of the masterminds behind the infamous broadcast was a former businessman, writer, and producer named John Houseman. Houseman was born on September 22nd, 1902, in Bucharest, Romania, to a French father and an English mother. By the time he was 5 years old, his parents realized that he was gifted because he was an extremely bright child that showed a lot of promise and was proficient in 5 languages. So his parents sent him to a school that would nourish his gifts in England, where John would find his muses that would change his life forever. He became absolutely enamored with writing and the theater and poured himself into both. And until it was time for him to go to college. Houseman had used his intellectual prowess to secure himself a scholarship to a prestigious British university. But just as he was about to leave, things took a turn for the worst and his father died, leaving just him behind to take care of his mother. He couldn't go to school while his mom was alone and grieving. So 17-year-old John dropped his college plans and went into the business of buying and selling grain, where eventually he would become quite successful and start his own company based in New York City. But no matter how much grain he sold, he still pined to be a writer and work in the theater. But he still had a lot of apprehension from leaving his business and taking that step. But then in 1929, he unexpectedly got his shot at showbiz when the U.S. stock market collapsed and ruined his business. So Houseman had nothing left to lose and decided to pursue his dreams and go into full-time writing for the stage. It was pretty hard to find work at first, but Houseman was incredibly talented and his work spoke for itself. So he was able to land gigs writing and directing plays across the city. Houseman's connections allowed him to put together an ensemble cast of very talented people in the New York theater scene. And one person Houseman wanted to work with was Orson Welles. Orson Welles was born on May 6, 1915 in Kenosha, Wisconsin, to a rich alcoholic father and a very progressive mother, who continually emphasized the importance of art because she knew her little boy was very gifted and wanted to nourish his gifts by exposing him to fine art, theater, and music. Her attention to these humanities paid off when by the age of 10, Orson was directing plays, acting, painting, and writing poetry, while other kids were busy playing with jacks and marbles. Miss Wells was so proud of her son and doted on him. She knew he was going to be so special, but just as Orson was coming into his own, his mother died and left him with his drunken father. And once under his father's care, it became very apparent that his father didn't know what to do with Orson. So he sent him to an all-boys boarding school near Chicago. He was incredibly hurt by this decision, but it became the best thing for him because he began to take over and run the theater department. But a few months before high school graduation, Orson's father died and left the artistic genius an orphan. Orson didn't know what to do. He had again suffered a tremendous loss at a young age, so Orson did the only thing he knew he could do and turned again to the theater. By taking a trip to Ireland and embedding himself into a theater group, and after throwing himself into theatrical productions, gained a reputation as a phenomenal actor. So much so that by 1934, Orson had acted his way to New York City and had become a member of the American Theater Company. While on stage, production had his heart, Orson found his voice worked exceptionally well for voicing characters in an audio-only plays on the burgeoning new medium known as radio. These audio plays paid Orson quite well and attracted him to the inside of a studio with a microphone in front of his face. But still, Orson yearned for the stage, and in 1935 acted in a production of Romeo and Juliet. Houseman had long admired Orson's talent and made it a point to see the play and make his way backstage, where Orson met Houseman and the two began to work together. They were successful in their partnership and by 1937 had formed their own Broadway theater company, known as the Mercury Theater. Because Orson and Houseman were such perfectionists, they did their due diligence and selected a cast of young actors who had honed their craft and, most importantly, put on one hell of a show. Not long after, several Mercury Theater productions opened to rave reviews, and the theatrical press began to take notice of Orson and called him the brightest moon to rise over Broadway in many years. And once that hit the papers, many eyes turned to the 23-year-old genius, including the eyes and ears of CBS radio executives. They had on many occasions heard Orson's booming voice and had witnessed his commanding stage presence. And now that the press was absolutely gaga over the young man, CBS Radio wanted a piece of the action and quickly offered Orson and the Mercury Theater a weekly program, dramatizing popular novels and giving Orson a chance to be the star and director of the show. So Orson jumped at the chance, and thus Mercury Theater Over the Air was born. Houseman rounded out the deal as producer and writer, and the rest of the Mercury Theater cast provided the actors. With everyone signed on, the group got to work writing and rehearsing, and on July the 11th, 1938, the first episode of Mercury Theater was beamed into American homes coast to coast. The very first selection was Bram Stoker's Dracula, and according to listeners, it delighted and frightened all that dared to listen to the horror classic. People couldn't wait for more Orson, but he was just getting started. The rest of the summer, Orson and Company produced dramatic adaptations of novel after novel, each week for CBS Radio, often finding it very hard to condense a novel down to 60 pages to fill 1 hour time slots. But Houseman and Orson were more than capable of making it happen and producing solid returns and good ratings for the program. While the show wasn't a strong performer for CBS, compared to its competing shows on other networks, CBS really believed in the product and renewed the show, ordering 13 more episodes and extending its run deep into the fall. Executives also moved the show to 8 p.m. instead of its usual 9 o'clock time slot in an attempt to get more families to tune in. From here on out, the Mercury Theater had big shoes to fill, and they knew it. So with Halloween fast approaching, Orson and Houseman knew they wanted to make a big splash. So they met for dinner that week and discussed what they wanted to do. Both of them had thought long and hard about the production and had decided they wanted to do something sci-fi related because both were big fans of the genre and thought it would play exceptionally well around Halloween. They racked their brains to figure out what novel to condense, and then it hit them like a ton of cosmic bricks. War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells was exactly what they needed. War of the Worlds had been written about 40 years prior, and in the novel, H.G. Wells asked what if there was life on Mars? And the Martians looked on Earth with envious eyes as their planet was dying and they needed somewhere to go. And because of their close proximity to Earth, they came to our little blue planet and tried to conquer it. In the book, the Martians land near London and attack England in giant killing machines, getting sustenance from devouring human blood and obliterating other humans that didn't serve their needs, with poisoned black smoke and heat rays. Orson and Houseman thought all of this would be a great fodder for their upcoming radio play. So they decided it would be perfect for their Halloween show. And with the decision made and the novel picked, Orson and Houseman got a hold of H.G. Wells' legal rep and bought the rights to portray the novel on the radio. But the transformation from book to the airwaves would require a few updates and tweaks. So Orson and Houseman began to brainstorm ideas when a brilliant and fateful idea hit Orson. Why not stage the Martian invasion from the book like a series of news flashes going out over the air? The public had been conditioned to know that serious things were happening when a news announcer broke into a program with a bulletin. After all, they had been listening all year to news flashes about the Nazis taking over Austria. So Orson thought the bulletins would add an air of authenticity and really hook their listeners into the story. Houseman really liked the idea and thought it was an excellent plot device. So he passed the book and the idea on to Mercury Theater's newest writer, Howard Koch, about a week before the show was to air. So Howard could write the script and have it ready to roll that Sunday. But the famous script almost didn't happen. After Koch read the book, he was completely dumbfounded. There wasn't much he could use to make the Martian invasion sound anything like a newscast. How on earth did Orson and Houseman expect him to work it into a script? So he called Houseman and asked him to reconsider the project. Houseman absolutely refused and told him to figure it out. So Koch sighed and resigned himself to his fate and began writing a script that he had less than a week to finish. For the purposes, he really worked his ass off.
This already sounds like a bad idea. This sounds like a Ryan idea. Like, hey,
it really does.
I have the best ideas. Fuck off.
Jesus. This sounds like Ryan would pitch it to you and I, Shelley, where it's like, hey, how about we take this Martian invasion and make it sound as authentic as possible? In a time when all the people had was the fucking radio.
I'm sorry you're allergic to fun.
It just already sounds like a bad idea.
I mean, just wait, you'll see. So for the purposes of the show, he decided to change a few things around to make the script more relevant. Instead of using London and the English countryside as the backdrop, he decided to use New York City and the surrounding area and have the invading Martians destroy real towns and landmarks close by. If he was going to have to suffer writing the script, then damn it, he was going to scare the pants off of everyone listening.
This sounds sort of like bad. This is just a bad setup.
But he needed a starting point for his Martian invasion. So he unfolded a map of the area and closed his eyes and randomly pointed to a spot on the map. And that spot just so happened to be the most perfect spot for the setting of Cope's mock alien invasion. And that town just so happened to be Grover's Mill, New Jersey, a small farming town about 50 miles from New York City and close to Princeton University. Pope really liked the name of the town. He thought it had a nice ring to it and felt like it legitimized his script. So he worked all night writing a draft and the next day handed it over to Houseman. Houseman liked the script, but still felt like it needed a few edits. So he tweaked the script a little, and by Thursday, the actors had a script in hand for rehearsals.
Yes, because that's exactly where the Martians are going to land, is in Grover's
Mill.
Well,
that's exactly where they pinpointed.
Because now, whenever you think about it, when people are abducted, it's always in some small, random rural area. I wonder if that is one of the true bases for some of this abduction theory, where that it's a rural area, there's nobody around, and they picked a place that reporters couldn't easily get to quickly to verify.
Where is Grover?
50 miles from
New York.
From New York.
All right.
By the time that a reporter actually made it out to check the story, the broadcast would have been over because it was a 1-hour radio show.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is a very interesting. Go ahead, Blake.
It's 50 miles southwest of between Trenton and New York City. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I knew exactly where they're coming to land.
Right, but Shelley, that's a very interesting point. I hadn't thought about that. That's very when it comes to alien abduction. So with a mostly finished script in hand, the actors began their table read and called upon the sound effects department and in-house CBS conductor Bernard Herrmann to prepare sounds and music for the upcoming show that Sunday evening. And everyone in the studio got to work, all except for Orson because he couldn't be there for the table read. He was busy directing a show down the block. So he had the read cut to vinyl to listen to it later. Everything seemed to be falling into place, but there was one problem. Everyone seemed to agree the script was kind of a bore, and it lacked the oomph that needed to be taken seriously. Several of the cast members were so dissatisfied that they told their relatives not to even bother listening that week. But that was before Orson got a hold of it.
I've done that with the theater production.
We've all done that with the theater production. Just don't come to this one. It's just
this is terrible.
High school thing, and our theater director's like, we have to sell this thing out. And literally everybody that was on the cast and crew told all of our friends and family, we're like, do not come to this production.
The very last production I ever did in high school was half acted and half to stage reading. And I told everyone, I was like, do not come to this. We did not have enough time to prepare this. Please don't.
We've all been there.
And of course, my whole damn family shows up too.
Exactly. That's because they love you and they're supporting you, and you say thank you, sir.
We had 3 people in our audience for that production. We made sure nobody came. Sorry, Miss Fisher, if you're watching this.
Now, the record from the table read was taken to Orson's home that evening, where he, Houseman, and the director of pre-production, Paul Stewart, all sat around and listened to it, and were all 3 bored to tears. Orson was sitting in his chair stewing and racking his brain, trying to figure out how to fix it. Finally, he stood up and began pacing the floor and said it needed to be more thrilling, and the news bulletins needed to be more real and more exciting. Houseman and Stewart wholeheartedly agreed and spent the rest of the night doctoring the script, making it more raw and scary. And by the morning, turned it into the CBS legal department. Legal took a look at it and had a few objections because it used official names for real government agencies. Now, they were all about a good scare, but they didn't want the government coming after them, so the names were changed to official sounding agencies, and the script was ready to roll. That Saturday, the actors ran through the script again, and this time it was much more exciting and a lot more fun. Actor Frank Reddick was going to play reporter Carl Phillips, and in preparation had been listening to a copy of the Hindenburg disaster over and over again until he nailed the emotion of the reporter, who had been at the scene and brought it to his role. But even with these improvements, Orson wasn't satisfied. It was still lacking something, but Orson couldn't put his finger on it, and he needed to figure it out before Sunday night. The next morning was the final rehearsal, and all the sound effects and music were in place. Orson walked into the studio and took his spot on a raised podium, and the last rehearsal began. Orson motioned to every actor and to the orchestra for their cues, and the Mercury Theater ran through the complete show. Everything seemed to run smoothly, but Orson, being the perfectionist that he was, cursed and freaked out throughout the entire reading. He had a lot riding on the show and wanted to keep the public's interest. So when he complained that he had to present such a silly show, people in the room understood and sympathized. But the show was going on the air regardless, whether Orson liked it or not. So he did what he could and made a few more changes and added a speech from the so-called Secretary of Interior that had been cut from an earlier draft, because Orson had an idea that would really scare people. He would ask actor Kenny Del Mar to read the speech during the height of the action and get him to do his pitch-perfect FDR impersonation.
Oh, fuck.
So if anyone was flipping through the channels, they may actually think that the president was on, and it would scare the bejesus out of them. But there was one tiny problem. Del Mar did such a good impression, his CBS bosses forbade him from doing so, unless he had expressed written permission from the White House. So naturally, he was a bit nervous about following through and brought this up to Orson. He didn't want to anger his bosses or the government, but Orson just smiled and shook his head at Del Mar and said, "Oh, Kenny, you know what I want." And with that, Del Mar was on board and all systems were go.
And that's how Shelley gets us to do the things that she wants. You know what I want.
Your bosses and government be damned. You do what I want you
exactly.
to do.
Bosses and government be damned. That is
because if you think about it, it was going to be a live show.
Mm-hmm.
And so once it's done, kind of like us, once it's out there, you can't take it back. So he did it. He was going to told him, just do it. Though, you know what I want done.
Mm-hmm.
What are they going to do? Pull you off there in the middle of it? They're not going to do that.
Yeah, what's the worst they can do?
Yeah.
It would have been a bit more dramatic if they did pull him off the air in the middle of it, though.
Oh, that would have, you know what? I think that would have incited even bigger chaos. Right?
Probably.
Right. In hindsight, probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, at 8 p.m. that evening, the Mercury Theater was on the air and went live with their production of War of the Worlds. The show's intro music played, and about 30 seconds into the broadcast, the announcer introduced Orson Welles as the star of the show. And Orson began reading the opening lines of the script as the narrator, clearly indicating that the production was just a show and not to be taken seriously. But right after Orson's intro, one of the actors playing a radio announcer read a fake news report from the Weather Bureau and pitched the program over to the Meridian Room at the Plaza Hotel in New York City, where band leader Roman Raquello was waiting to play dance music. Anyone savvy enough had caught on by now, because A, neither place existed, and B, neither did Roman Raquello. But most people hadn't caught on and listened to the orchestra at the fake venue, when suddenly the music was interrupted again with a fake bulletin, telling listeners that an astronomy professor at a Chicago observatory had witnessed multiple explosions of incandescent gas on Mars. About this time, listeners who had just tuned in thought the report seemed legit, especially when the broadcast switched back to orchestra music for only about 30 seconds, and the news announcer broke back in, saying that the government meteorological bureau had asked observatories across the nation to keep an eye out for strange explosions coming from the surface of Mars, and saying they were going to carry an interview with a well-known astronomer named Professor Richard Pearson about the subject shortly. And again, the program switched back to music at the quote-unquote Meridian Room. After about 20 seconds of orchestra music, actor Frank Reddick broke in as Carl Phillips, the field reporter, saying he was at the Princeton Observatory and was there to interview Professor Richard Pearson. As Professor Pearson began to speak, anyone familiar with the program would have recognized the voice, because it was Orson playing the role of the professor. But those not familiar and just tuning in heard a very well-spoken and distinguished man explain why there wasn't life on Mars, and how the explosions from the red planet were nothing to worry about. Just as the interview with the professor was beginning to wind down, someone handed him a telegram from the Natural History Museum in New York City saying that a massive earthquake took place near Princeton at about 9:15 p.m. Another clue that the news report on air was indeed fake, because it was only about 8:09 p.m. and no one in Princeton had felt a thing. Phillips then wrapped the interview and kicked the broadcast back to the studio, and Orson cued the orchestra to play piano for about 10 seconds, giving the entire situation a legit and spooky feel. Suddenly, the announcer breaks in again with another special news flash, telling the listeners an astronomer at McGill University saw 3 more explosions emanating from the planet Mars, and that at 8:50 p.m., a flaming object crashed in a farmer's field in Grover's Mill, New Jersey, and that reporter Carl Phillips was on his way to the scene. The listeners didn't know it, but the invasion had just begun. Orchestra music again played for about 20 seconds when it suddenly stopped and Carl Phillips broke in, telling the listeners he was at the location where the object had crashed, with the sounds of men yelling and sirens wailing in the background. Phillips begins to tell the audience what he was witnessing and begins to paint a vivid picture of a tense scene unfolding around him. A crowd had gathered at the farm, as curious onlookers had come to take a look at what crashed. But by now it had become evident that whatever had landed was no meteorite. Phillips described the object as a pale yellow cylinder, about 30 yards in diameter and halfway sticking out of the ground. Phillips mentioned a strange hum coming from inside, and being the consummate reporter, got closer to the object and placed the microphone even closer so the listeners could get a sense of what he was hearing. At this point, Professor Pearson had also arrived at the scene, and Phillips asked him if he still thought the object was a meteor. Pearson admitted that the object was indeed extraterrestrial, when suddenly Phillips screamed, "Something's happening," and the top popped off of one of the cylinders. Black acrid smoke escaped from the cylinder, and a terrible tentacled creature crawls out of the craft, as Phillips described how horrifying it is, with the sounds of pandemonium and screaming in the background. At this point, Frank Reddick's studying of the Hindenburg tape really came in handy, because he channeled every bit of the intensity into his role as the fake news reporter and began to describe the wave of destruction the Martians unleashed as they incinerated the policemen around the pit and approached Phillips. Then the transmission stops for a few seconds and there is only dead air. The main news announcer in the studio suddenly breaks in and informs the listeners that they had lost transmission to Grover's Mill. Piano music fades in and plays for 10 minutes, giving the listeners time to stew and speculate about what was happening. After that extended period of piano, the announcer comes back and says that 40 people lay dead around the crash site in Grover's Mill, and their bodies were burned beyond recognition, and unfortunately, one of them was our lovable reporter, Frank Phillips. With that, the announcer turned the airwaves over to the commander of the New Jersey State Militia, who informed the audience that martial law had been declared and that the state militia was on its way to evacuate citizens in the vicinity of the crash site. After he was finished, the announcer came back on the air and said they were receiving a transmission from an eyewitness of the tragedy at Grover's Mill. The voice that came in on the transmission was that of Professor Pearson, who had escaped to a nearby farmhouse. He went into great detail about the Martians' heat ray that they used to vaporize everyone at the scene, and finished with a chilling warning, saying that the Martians possessed a scientific knowledge far exceeding our own. The news announcer thanked Professor Pearson and pitched it to the captain of the New Jersey State Militia, who assured the public that the situation was under control, and the Martians were surrounded and contained. But suddenly his demeanor changed when he spotted movement, and a shield-like object rose up out of the Martian cylinder and began walking on long metal legs towards him. And just like Phillips earlier in the evening, his transmission cut out and the announcer breaks back in with a dour and somber tone and tells the public, as incredible as it may seem, the beings from the crash site were the vanguard of an invading Martian army that wiped out about 7,000 soldiers from the New Jersey State Militia in a flash and had taken control of the state of New Jersey. Because of the dire situation, they were going to pitch to Washington, D.C., where the Secretary of the Interior was standing by to give a speech. Actor Kenny Delmar then launched into his pitch-perfect FDR impersonation, and as he did, the CBS switchboards began to light up.
Mm-hmm. Whoops.
That's going to be the part that gets them. Like, I'm just trying to put myself in these people's shoes, because you have to remember at this time, I mean, this is the only form of communication. That's it.
Instantaneous mass communication.
Mass communication and entertainment too. I mean, we're talking 1938. Like, so this is it.
People trusted what they heard.
Yes, and they trusted it, and they didn't have fancy cell phones in their pockets to do their research and see all of this other shit going on.
I mean,
So,
this is like someone hijacking the CBS channel on television right now and playing like a fake AI video of like aliens invading.
Yeah.
Like that's the equivalent.
Yeah, but see, I feel like immediately we would be having people going, "Yeah, I'm here. There's nothing going on," because we have that ability. We have a better mass communication system now.
I would like to think so. I would like to think so, but there's a lot of times where I have talked to people and be like, "Hey, did you see this thing?" And it's completely bullshit, and they have believed it. So I would like to believe so, but I don't know.
Well, and a lot of the people that believed it came in to the show late. That's why you got to be there on time, people, when it starts.
Exactly.
Be there when it starts, so you're in on the gag.
How many people have been like, "Hey, sorry I was late to the show," and they're lost?
And they're like, "What are y'all talking about?" Yeah, started at 8
We're talking about the Martian invasion that's currently happening right now.
Right. You
So-
forgot to do it in FDR voice.
The Martians have come to land.
The Martians have come to land.
We have nothing to fear but the Martians themselves.
I believe that's Kennedy.
I believe that's Kennedy, Ryan, not FDR. But good job.
This would be John F. Kennedy. So,
Okay. Continue on
there you
before
go.
we get.
Maybe Ryan should get some voiceover lessons.
I keep telling him that.
gigs.
Nope. So Houseman had been watching and listening to the show with CBS radio supervisor Davidson Taylor from the comfort of the studio control room, completely oblivious to what was happening outside of the studio. When the phone on the wall began jumping off the hook, Taylor answered, and as he held the receiver, he turned 3 different shades of white. Houseman was confused and asked what was wrong. Taylor looked at him and said, "Stop the show now." Houseman, even more confused, asked why. Taylor said because people thought it was real, and outside of the studio, they were losing their minds. So he insisted they either stop the show or announce that it was a play. But Houseman refused and even blocked Taylor from entering the studio. Taylor was absolute. What was that?
I'm just laughing. I'm like, dedication to the craft, man. We're finishing
absolutely.
this thing.
Dedication to the theater.
Yes.
Taylor was absolutely furious. So Houseman agreed to make the play announcement, but only during the station break. But had he known what was happening outside, he may have been more compliant. Because people around the country were going bonkers. Many of them had been listening to other shows and were late to tune into CBS. So they had missed the announcement at the beginning of the show, and naturally many of them were alarmed about what they were hearing. So they began to call CBS to see if it was real. As the operators at the CBS building told caller after caller, the broadcast was not real and they were listening to a play. But CBS wasn't the only one dealing with these calls. Operators all over the country were flooded with questions, and many were not in the know, so even they began to panic. In South Dakota, the local operator was convinced that the Martians had indeed landed, so she called all the houses she could, warning them of the impending doom from outer space, headed directly towards their homes.
Oh my God.
This is poor that phone call.
It's like, Nancy, you don't have to tell everything you know. Sit back down, girl. Sit back down. It's fine.
Damn. I couldn't imagine being that one. Just like, this is your local operator, Trisha. Just to let you know, the Martians have landed and they're coming for you.
Save yourself, run.
Just laser beams going off in the background.
This is a collect call from get the fuck out of town. Meanwhile, in the real town of Grover's Mill, many farmers in the area had heard the broadcast, and not being people to take anything laying down, grabbed their guns and headed to the supposed crash site. But instead of a giant Martian killing machine, all they found were other gun-toting farmers and several confused people scratching their heads. People in the rural communities weren't the only ones affected. Educated people all across the country were freaking out too. At St. Elizabeth College, a girl scared everyone in her dorm by running around her dorm and screaming at the top of her lungs that a rocket was coming from Mars and they were all going to die. Naturally, the other students began to freak out, and some even gathered to pray and hoped everything would be all right. A student driving home from New York towards New Jersey heard the broadcast and legitimately thought his family was dead and feared suffering the same fate as his unlucky relatives, so he turned his car around and burned rubber back north. But despite all the chaos around the country, the broadcast rolled along, and the reporter on the radio continued relaying info about all the destruction and carnage the Martians were leaving in their wake, until eventually the invasion arrived in New York City, and the Martians began destroying it as well, while the reporter described the utter obliteration of the city until he himself succumbed to the Martians' poisonous smoke live on the air. People listening with bated breath waited to hear what would happen next, and were relieved when, at 40 past the hour, actor and announcer Dan Seymour announced that the audience had been listening to an adaptation of H.G. Wells' sci-fi novel War of the Worlds, while the station took a break for its affiliates. And when it did, CBS bigwigs, aware of the pandemonium outside, told Orson he needed to announce that the previous 40 minutes had all been part of a play. But Orson thought it was redundant and declined. These executives didn't understand his art.
They didn't understand his art.
He's like, they should have been here from the beginning. We've already said that.
Oh, man.
The consummate actor.
Yes.
And director.
I'm not breaking character. We're continuing as is.
These executives didn't understand his art, so instead he continued the story. Still playing the part of Professor Pearson and describing the days following the Martian invasion, eventually describing the Martians' unexpected defeat at the hands of an earthbound pathogen, and ending the infamous production by reminding listeners at the very end that the previous program was all in good fun and telling them that what they had just heard was, quote, the Mercury Theater's own version of dressing up in a sheet and jumping out of the bush and yelling boo. And remember, if your doorbell rings, there's no one there, and that was no Martian. It's Halloween. And with that, the most infamous radio broadcast of all time left the air. Orson took off his headphones and left the studio, feeling proud of himself and happy about the production. But the people in radio land didn't share the same sentiment. In New York City, a couple had missed the beginning of the show and tuned in about 10 minutes late. When they heard all the panic and scary situations unfolding on the air, panic began to set in, and they thought they would be trapped by the Martians' war machines and their poison gas if they stayed at home. So they jumped on a train headed towards Hartford. The couple was just happy to get out of harm's way and were relieved to be headed away from the danger. As they rode the train, they struck up a conversation with another couple and told them why they were on the train. The other couple looked at them with a look of confusion and told them that they had been the victim of a prank. Orson Welles had been doing a dramatic reading of War of the Worlds on the air. The couple felt like idiots and were very angry. And to make matters worse, they had only bought one-way tickets, so when the train arrived in Hartford, the couple had to beg for train fare to get back home. In Kansas, a fraternity had heard the broadcast and were glued to every word as they became more terrified. And just as the action was getting good, one of the brothers lit a string of firecrackers and flicked the lights on and off, sending the fraternity brothers scattering. Something Shelley would do.
That is something I would so do.
In Concrete, Washington, the town's power suddenly went out right in the middle of Orson Welles' alien invasion. And based on all the evidence they were seeing, it proved to them that Martians were indeed invading, so they packed up their families and fled into the mountains to wait out the coming apocalypse. Across the country in Princeton, 2 geology professors heard that a meteor had hit just a couple of miles from campus. And it being their area of expertise, the professors were very excited. So they gathered up their meteorite collection equipment and rushed out to the scene of the supposed meteor crash, hoping to collect specimens before residents of town got to it. But when they got out there, they were greatly disappointed because no matter how much they searched, they couldn't find it. And also, several more people were out there looking in the same area. Professors then figured out the rumors were because of the program and were none too pleased that they had been made fools of. A little further up the road in Trenton, New Jersey, call after call began coming into the police department, asking about the supposed invasion. Over 2,000 calls came in and ran the operators ragged. The city manager claimed that the calls crippled police operations. Because of the calls and panic across the state, the New Jersey State Police sent troopers with gas masks out to Grover's Mill to investigate. But all they encountered were crowded roads and throngs of agitated people looking to catch a glimpse of the murderous invaders. Meanwhile, back in the CBS studio, as Orson was leaving, CBS staffers stopped him and informed him of the chaos in the streets. They told Orson they had received several phone calls from public officials, one even claiming that they were going to come down to the studio and punch them in the nose. As they were telling Orson about the phone calls, CBS staffers and executives flooded the studio and confiscated all the scripts. while ushering Orson and Houseman into a back room where they allowed waiting members of the press to interview them. The press had so many damning questions about the calamity across the country, it had Orson and Houseman believing that they had committed mass murder by causing national panic. Eventually, CBS officials were able to sneak Orson and Houseman out the back door and away from the press, so the two could go on their way while they tried to do damage control. CBS immediately took to the airwaves and began making multiple announcements all the way up until midnight, letting people know that it was just a play and no Martians had actually landed. But still, people kept calling and asking if there was any danger. Some even threatened to sue CBS for all they were worth. The next morning, papers hit the newsstands, and splashed all over their front pages in big, bold headlines were various stories about the events from the previous night. One article claimed New Jersey motorists ignored traffic laws in an attempt to escape Martian death rays. Another claimed 20 families from one city block ran out of their homes with their faces covered in cloth in an effort to flee poisonous Martian gas. Another claimed a New York City actress as a casualty of the fake invasion because she heard the poisonous gas had reached her neighborhood, and when she ran out of her apartment, she tripped over her own feet and fell down a flight of stairs, injuring herself and breaking her arm in the process. And yet another article claimed a woman suffered a heart attack while one of her children became so hysterical he began to vomit. CBS was worried about the public backlash and potential governmental regulation, so they arranged a press conference for Orson on Halloween afternoon to explain himself and answer questions from the press. So that afternoon, Orson sat down in front of newsreel cameras and a sea of reporters. He was unshaven and sleep deprived, giving the appearance that he had sat up all night worrying. He started off by telling the press, "We are deeply shocked and regretful about the results of last night." He was admittedly bewildered and sincere and genuine when he said, quote, "It came as a rather great surprise to us that the H.G. Wells classic that is the basis for many fantasies about mythical invasions from the planet Mars, a story which is familiar to children, had such a profound effect on radio listeners. It would seem to me unlikely that an invasion from Mars would find ready acceptance. I was frankly terribly shocked to learn that it did. Radio is new and we are learning the effect it has on people, and we've learned a terrible lesson." Orson came across as apologetic and shocked, so he seemed truly sorry. And after the broadcast and press conference, a lot of the public was convinced that Wells and his crew had done nothing nefarious, and it was all a fun Halloween prank, or at worst, a big misunderstanding. But there were still those that were angry that they were made a fool of. They began writing their representatives and the FCC, demanding something be done and punishments be handed out for the Mercury Theater violating the public's trust and scaring the bejesus out of the whole of America. So, of course, the government had to stick its nose in the fray, and Iowa Senator Clyde Herring quickly announced that he was going to introduce a bill into Congress that would control such abuses of the public airwaves. And as a result, the FCC announced that they were going to investigate the program and any broadcast that had created general panic or fear. But the only thing Americans hate worse than being made a fool of is censorship and being told what they can and can't listen to. So the FCC was inundated with letters for the next 5 weeks telling them that while they didn't like what Orson had done, the government shouldn't be telling the public the type of media to consume or what people can and can't say on the radio. The radio should remain a vital part of the free press. As one Iowa teacher critical of the potential overcorrection of a governmental body stated, "It is not Orson's fault people are so dumb. Please don't do as Senator Herring wants and tune all programs to the intelligence of a child." Ultimately, the FCC listened to the public, and in early December, the FCC reported that they were dropping all complaints that they had received, and that the Communications Act of 1934 gave them no authority to actually censor programs, and believed CBS had done everything they could to protect the public interest in the future, which in turn caused Senator Herring's bill to die in Congress, and the government had sided with the pranksters and protected freedom of speech. Now that the government had made its ruling, CBS still had to clear up several legal matters regarding the show. Several lawsuits had come into CBS headquarters, claiming Orson and Houseman owed them for damages. One claimed his wife had a nervous breakdown and had become incapacitated for a month, so he was going to sue for lost wages. Others claimed a myriad of other reasons as to why they were owed money, But little did they know, Orson and Houseman had a clause in their contracts stating that they were not liable for the content of their show. So the lawsuits went absolutely nowhere, and Orson and Houseman were free to continue their pursuits.
Do we have that clause in our contracts that we're not responsible for the content of the show? Because if not, we need it.
Not in the show, but we do with everything else that we do.
With everything else that we're not responsible for content. Okay.
We're not responsible for anything that may happen to you physically, emotionally, or spiritually when you come along with us.
That's right.
That's right. Well, I need to renegotiate my contract with this show because that needs to be on there. I'm not responsible for anything about the show.
Because of the success of the broadcast and the attention showered on Orson, Hollywood began paying attention to the young actor and used his broadcast and his handling of himself in the press to springboard Orson into superstardom. RKO Pictures recruited him to make movies for them, and Orson wrote, directed, and acted in one of American cinema's most defining movies, Citizen Kane, and went on to have a successful acting career. John Houseman split from Orson about a year after the broadcast and continued producing plays. He also got into movies and was nominated for an Academy Award in 1973. Howard Koch went on to write Casablanca and make his own mark in the film industry, but was ultimately derailed by the McCarthy hearings and was blacklisted. But it all started with a fun Halloween story on a Sunday night that no one believed in until it scared America to death and sent ripple effects across history. And that is the story of the broadcast.
That's how it started with us. It all started on 4 days before Halloween with a story, and here we are.
And we've been scaring them ever since.
We've been scaring them ever
since.
Every time they see Ryan's face on the screen, it is just like when they
faint because I'm so pretty.
Oh my God.
What do y'all think of that?
So I know this story pretty well. I remember that my grandfather talked about how he had heard it when it was broadcast, and that he had been there at the beginning because he liked that radio show. So he was always there at the beginning, and he knew that it was, just a show. But he had his neighbors were coming over knocking on his door going, "Hey, have you heard there's aliens?" And my granddad's going, "It's a show," because my granddad was on time for everything. So, it's just, but again, we think that is so far-fetched that that people could mass panic like that. But if you think about it, whenever that alert went out that a missile had been launched at Hawaii, remember? People went into mass panic. They began to call their friends and family and say goodbye. There were some who went to the extreme of choosing to remove themselves from this life. And people were jumping into sewer drains and all that kind of stuff to take cover underground. So this idea of mass panic, it's not like it can't happen to us now.
Right.
It did. And what was that, about 5 or 6 years ago that happened? If it was
I think so. Yeah.
Has it really been that long since?
I think so. I think so. Somebody will look it up and correct me if I'm wrong on it. But that kind of mass panic, and again, it's that whole, I'm not going to wait for anything to be verified. I'm not going to wait. Well, I got an alert. Why would I get an alert? Why would I hear this on the radio if it wasn't the truth?
Weirdly enough, it was actually 8 years ago.
Was it that long?
Dude, wait, hold on. The fact that you bring it up is a weird synchronicity because 8 years ago to the day.
No, what was the day?
January 13th, 2018.
What?
Interesting
you bring that up, Shelley.
That is interesting. Huh.
I was just using it as an example of mass panic without actually having any verifiable data.
Yeah.
So, this could happen. If you think it can happen to us, it did 8 years ago.
Oh, it absolutely can. Yeah, and it absolutely can. It absolutely can. All you got to do is play into people's fears. You just got to play into people's fears about some of this magnitude, whether it can be invasion, it can be war, it can be whatever. There are people out there who are panicking about anything that you can think of. I mean, there's doomsday preppers. There's and a lot of people call them quacks and crazies and all that kind of stuff. But when the world goes to shit, who are you going to turn to? Your people who have go bags and who are ready. But yeah, it absolutely can happen. Mass panic.
Well, and a lot of people think that the reason why, because we talk about like pushing for disclosure on actual UFOs all the time, and a lot of people think that's the reason why they haven't done it is because of this broadcast right here. Look at how people reacted back then. I mean, if you were to tell people that it was actually happening now, like they could react in the same way or worse, and that's like a lot of the.
See, I find that really interesting because yes, I will agree with you on some aspect of that. I think that is a reason why full disclosure just has not taken place, because mass hysteria is going to go rampant. But if you think about it, during COVID, when all the shit was blowing up and that the news headlines were nothing but COVID and everything like that, they snuck in there that, oh yeah, by the way, UFOs, UAPs, they're real. They're real.
Right.
Basically all but coming out saying that aliens are real. We're talking about unidentified aerial phenomena or unidentified flying objects. They 100% like, yeah, they're real.
They did, but it was a slow leak too, remember? Like it's been a slow leak of that. So like this was all at one time. So they think if they're gonna say it all at one time, people are like gonna lose their shit.
Well, here's the difference in that though. This was a broadcast that made you think, that made the world think that it was in imminent danger. This releasing of information about UAPs and UFOs and all of that, you're not going to be telling us something about imminent danger that is right here, clear, present in our face at the moment. That's why I think that that's just an excuse they're using. There are some people who are ready to know the truth, to want to know, and really would not be surprised. I think their real reason for not disclosing it would actually challenge people's faith, people's belief.
That was going to be my
and higher.
That was my second point.
Higher powers. Yeah, there probably is a higher power. It's just not the one you may think.
Yeah.
So I think that might be another reason they don't disclose. But
well, and I'll agree with you. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I'll agree with you or disagree with you actually, because I do think that there would be like mass hysteria as if the danger is imminent, because there are people who fear aliens that hard. That much, even the fact of knowing that they are out there and them saying like, yeah, they're 100% real. Like we've met them, we've shaken their claw. I don't know. But anyways, yeah, exactly. We've pointed fingers at each other. I don't know. But anyways, I was gonna say touch the tip, but
there's a probing joke in there somewhere.
I know, that's what I'd say. Like
we've touched cosmic tips.
But I think that there would be mass hysteria, and I think very quickly followed by a crisis of faith, because everybody knows, oh, we're made in God's image. Well, what the fuck are those? If we are, where the fuck did those come from?
Exactly. Like,
so
what is
I
that?
think that combo would cause a different level of mass hysteria at this point. Because you'd have a bunch of people who'd be like, we're being taken advantage of, we're being lied to, like, fuck it, let's go ransack everything, we're gonna loot, we're gonna whatever, riot.
All you have to look at them and say, the aliens won't like that. We won't.
But no, it's very putting ourselves back in 1938, it's very easy to see how this was taken as a real invasion, and how because you're talking about this is right before a lot of the huge UFO flaps that take place, so the belief is there. I mean, Orson Welles, H.G. Wells, obviously has written a book about it, so the belief has been there for what, 30 40 years at this point. But this is in a mass consumption type way is what I was trying to say.
Right. And like you said, this is 9 years before the Roswell crash. This is 9 years before Kenneth Arnold ever saw the UFOs flying over the Cascade Mountains. This is still pretty fringe at the time, but the fact, and I think that's why Orson Welles was kind of like, I can't believe people actually thought this was real and thought this was a real thing. Like, I don't understand. Like, this makes no sense to me. So I think he truly was bewildered and was confused as to why people thought that this was actually a thing. Like, do you think that? So, do you think that he? Okay, there's some evidence to suggest that he knew what he was doing and he was trying to do that, but there's some evidence to suggest that it was just for part of the show and just to be fun. Like, what do you think? You think he knew what he was doing?
I think he was a man who loved his art. I honestly do.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
I get the commitment to want to fully commit to the part that you're trying to play. I understand that, but we're all three also ex-theater kids. We know what it's like to take on a role and fully commit and learn about it and try and character develop and really be able to drive home that story. I really think that that's what he was trying to do. Believable. That's the whole part of theater, is you're playing a character. Your whole thing as an actor is to be believable. And this man was, his team was, they succeeded in that, in the artistry aspect of it. Do I think that he could have handled it, you know, a little midway through when they started saying, hey, by the way, dude, people are fucking freaking out. Can you please remind them that this is a play? Yes, he did. But maybe you could have said it a couple of more times, you know? I mean, I think that was a lapse in judgment on his part. But overall, I think it's just a man in love with his art.
He did say that they would do it during the station breaks. I mean, doing shows, would you ever have wanted somebody to step in the middle of your show and go, this is just a play, you guys. You've totally broken everything I've been building. Because the whole part of being in theater is you are there to create an immersive experience for the audience where they forget everything and totally focus on the story you're telling. So I can see how he would not want that. He's like, we said at the beginning, we are performing this. We are, you know, we're staying in character. We're doing this. I think he was very dedicated to his craft, to his art, and he was going to deliver the best product he possibly could because that was his job. And he took great pride in that. And I think, again, like you said, I think he thought it was just a whole bunch of hooey because he probably assumed everybody came in at 8 o'clock when the show started and heard the announcement.
Yeah.
And he was not responsible for what happened after that, I'm sure, in his mind, because at that point he was performing.
He's like, like you said, he was like, hey, we already said this is a play. That's on them if they can't figure that out yet.
I will say, as an artist on many different levels, I congratulate the man for making it so fucking believable. You know, that is a feat in of itself. I do think that there was a bit lapse in judgment that he probably could have been, hey, we got panic in the streets. People really think that this is going on. Can you please remind them? Even during the breaks, he could have said it beginning of the break, end of the break, do it again at the next break, beginning, end break, you know, at the end of the program, beginning of the break, and really hit it kind of throughout.
But you have to think, how many of those people would have still been listening in the breaks? They might have heard it go to a commercial break and now they're running, you know, to tell their friends or talk to their friends and coming back. How many people might have actually been sitting through those breaks to hear it?
They'd have been like this old man, right?
He'd been like
getting his double barrel shotgun out, like
been like, I better go see what's going on
out
here.
The window.
Hey, you know, I mean, if you think about it, now back before you could stream and do all that kind of stuff, the second a commercial came on, you ran for the potty, you ran for a snack, and you would hurdle that couch to get back in your seat whenever that commercial break ended. People didn't necessarily stay for the commercial breaks. That's when they went to go get a snack or potty, even during radio. Yeah. Because they didn't want to miss it. So how many people would have actually potentially heard it? They might have said, tell me when the break's over. I don't want to miss any of what they're reporting.
Well, but I mean, also think of how we handle breaking news segments and all that kind of stuff. Like now, I remember, like now, let's just say when something breaks in, like they cover it until like everything's done. But I do remember sometimes whenever I was growing up, like a breaking news segment would come in, and yes, they would be on air for like an hour and a half, you know, and you'd just be soaking in all this information. But they'd be like, "Hey, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back," because they didn't have any more updates at the time. They were just repeating information. So I'm sure the head honchos were like, "Hey, it's a great time. Let's get some commercials in." You know, blah blah blah. Yeah, even then we would all in the household be like, let me run and do that. I gotta run and do this real quick. I'm gonna use the bathroom.
Somebody holler at me when it's back on. That's right.
Yep. I remember that.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Yeah, I get it. People wouldn't have been there to catch, you know, hey, this is a play.
I mean, and how many people, like, and how many people too at that point had, like, when they did announce it was a play a second time, had already turned off the radio and were freaking the fuck out and trying to figure out what to do.
And we're thinking, I have to go get in my car. I have to get as far away from here as I can. Oh my gosh, there's aliens landing. I have to go see them. Okay, let me tell you something. If you hear that the aliens are landing, don't go there. Nothing good will happen to you.
Have you ever seen Mars Attacks?
If you weren't invited, don't go. Okay.
Brian said, have you ever seen Mars Attacks? Yes.
Number one,
quality
you're in the way.
flip, man.
Yeah.
Number one, you're in the way. Number two, you got no business there. And if there is something really going on, do you really want to be one of the casualties that's reported? Do you really want to be one of the ones that, hey, yeah, it really is poison gas. Look, Fred fell down. Yeah, Fred, you should have stayed at home.
Poor Fred.
have y'all ever actually sat down and listened to the actual broadcast?
I have. I've listened to it. It's very convincing. You can find it.
It's on YouTube
anywhere. Yeah, you can find it on YouTube.
Sure.
The first 30 minutes, you could see why somebody tuning in was like, "Holy shit, what the hell is going on here?"
Yeah,
it's incredibly well done.
It is very convincing. Now, I'm going to kind of bring like a conspiratorial thing into this because
yes, please.
there is a lot of evidence to suggest that a lot of these things that were reported in the newspapers never actually happened because the newspapers were competing with radio at the time for people to buy and listen and listen to what they were saying. So they were trying to attack radio as a new medium, telling people, see what happens, what radio did. Now you need to be reading the paper instead of like listening to the radio because look what radio did to everybody.
So you're saying that they used some yellow journalism to keep the panic and put the blame for misinformation on
a new
the
medium.
Media source.
Yeah,
right.
Got it.
Yeah. There was quite a lot of that. So there's a lot of evidence to suggest that a lot of this, what has been reported as actually happening that night, never even happened. Like there's a lot of evidence to suggest that there was probably way less mass hysteria than what was reported in the newspaper because the newspaper was just doing a hit job on the radio.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me. It's a marketing tactic at that point. I mean, look at all the transitions throughout just our lifetimes that we've had to endure. Let's just say, I'm thinking of different mediums here, going from VHS to DVD. From DVD to Netflix, from Netflix to full-blown streaming after we've got cable over here and all of this. So newspapers are basically obsolete at this point. I don't even think I know anybody who still reads a newspaper except for my grandfather. So I mean, and along the ways we've seen these wars, quote unquote, erupt between the old media and the new media. So it doesn't surprise me that there's a bit of conspiratorial aspect to it from the newspaper side.
And what a great way to sell your papers, to put a headline in about mass hysteria. This is what happened after last night.
One?
And if mass hysteria hits nation.
At broadcast a Martian invasion. Absolutely.
So what a great way to sell your paper is if you happen to have missed the show, all you see is this.
Yeah.
You're buying that newspaper and you're reading it. I don't disagree. I don't necessarily think that's a conspiracy theory. I think probably a lot of papers found that one guy standing in the field alone going, I seen it. And they ran with it. Again, another interesting parallel to today's alien abduction theory.
Absolutely. Well, if you want to read, get more in depth and read some more stories, go check out Spooked by Gail Jarrow. This is the book I used for the research for this podcast. It gets way more in depth, and there's a lot more stories of people freaking out and going crazy. And it kind of goes into more in depth about the writing of the show and everything too. So, but it's, I wanted to cover this because this is one of my favorite things in history. Like it is from a theater kid perspective, and like I said, from the UFO and the alien perspective, it just kind of melds everything together that I love.
Well, if you think about it, it's exactly what we do, but in 1938 version of it.
Exactly.
They came on and they gave you a story. We come on and we give you a story. We just get to have video with it too.
Absolutely. And you have the benefit of knowing it's not actually happening outside.
It's a show. Because
I'm going to figure out how to make Martians land in the background at some point on my camera. And then it should be like, the invasion started. Started, guys.
So, gentlemen, final thoughts?
I think, like I said, it's one of my favorite things throughout history. I do think that it may have been blown up more than what it actually was. And... No. People are like, from the newspapers, the newspapers were blowing it up and just inflating everything. And I don't think people freaked out nearly as bad as we think they did, but it's fun to think about.
Yeah.
Blake?
I say bravo to Orson Welles and his team and everybody who put that on to bring such a compelling and believable quote unquote radio broadcast to the air. I love the fact that they kind of gave him a little jest with like, no, we're going to commit to our art. This is what we're doing. Okay, fine. We'll concede to one time in the middle of the breaks to tell him it's a play. But that's it. I'm done. I'm going back to performing. I like this story. I'll have to go listen to the broadcast because no, I haven't heard it. I've read the book, but I haven't heard the broadcast. So this was interesting. I kind of like this prank aspect versus how far is too far type thing.
Okay.
So.
And my final thoughts on it are Welles was brilliant. Brilliant actor, brilliant writer, brilliant producer. And he absolutely capitalized on people's fears in this case to make a compelling story that the audience members were completely immersed in. I don't really think he realized the kind of chaos that was created from it. But at the end of the day, still a hell of a story. And I commend him. And so with that, Blake, why don't you tell them everything they need to know?
All right. Sounds good. Well, if you want to support our show directly, check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/EVP podcast. For just $5 a month, you'll unlock over 450 Patreon exclusive videos, including the pre and post broadcast, which are the 30 minutes before and the 30 minutes after this live broadcast. So you're getting an additional hour with us each week. Your support from this goes directly back to the show and towards the adventures that we bring you week after week. And if you're not sure about joining Patreon, try it risk-free with our 7-day free trial. Make sure to stay connected with us. Follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and many more by searching Everything Vaguely Paranormal and looking for the green sound wave. And remember, you can catch us live every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook and YouTube.
And it's a show.
Yeah. Go make sure you subscribe to our Eventbrite page to be notified when public investigation tickets go on sale, because as of tonight at 10 p.m., we will have 3 events that will be going on sale. These are going to be the 3 2-night investigations at the Old Park Hotel that we will be having this entire year. So this is how we are releasing our tickets now, y'all. When we get in location, we're going to put up all the dates for sale at one time so you can plan accordingly. So again, those 3 Old Park Hotel events will be for sale tonight at 10 p.m. And also, don't forget to check out our merch store for all your merch favorites: t-shirts, coffee mugs, stickers, pillows, hoodies, and so much more. That link is everything-vaguely-paranormal.creator- I fucked it up. Just look for the Linktree link that'll be on the Everything Vaguely Paranormal Facebook and X profiles Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time, as well as in all of our show notes for you audio listeners, or you can search linktr.ee/Everything Vaguely Paranormal. We are grateful for your continued support. Every like, comment, share, and download keeps the adventures alive. So if you have a favorite episode, share it with your friends. And one of the easiest things you can do to help out our show and its ratings wherever you get your audio from, go over there and download the episode and leave us a real quick review. 5 stars would be greatly appreciated. If you have a story, comment, or question, or would like to be a guest on the show, or have us as guests on your show, email us at theevppod@gmail.com. That is THEEVPPOD@gmail.com.
Go like, share, and subscribe to that YouTube channel, and make sure that you put a thumbs up. Let us know you were here.
Absolutely.
So thanks again for tuning in to another weekly edition of Everything Vaguely Paranormal. I'm Ryan Roberts, and these are my partners in the paranormal, Mr. Blake Smith and Miss Shelley Pruitt, and we will see y'all next Tuesday.
Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.